Carlson, tonight, Hurricane Michael is onshore, pounding parts of Florida and Alabama and Georgia right now. It hit the Florida Panhandle as a strong Category 4 hurricane, only 1 mile per hour shy of coming onshore as a Category 5. It is a dangerous storm, more dangerous than a lot of us realized. Camera crews now just getting an up-close look at the damage it has done. We'll show that to you in just a minute. But first to the political and media news tonight, and there's a lot of it. You may have noticed the remarkable similarities between the Democratic Party's daily talking points and a lot of the political coverage you see from news outlets. Often these two things are identical. Even the fabled Rockettes at Radio City Music Hall are not as in sync. Everyone in this media political chorus line is putting on precisely the same performance. Consider the question of angry left-wing mobs. They seem to be everywhere all of a sudden in this formerly placid country. They're yelling at Republicans in restaurants and airports. They're pounding on the front doors of the Supreme Court. They're blocking intersections, threatening passersby on the street. This is the youth wing of the Democratic Party. Yet the Democratic Party's position is they do not exist. There are no mobs. Ignore your lying eyes. Well, not surprisingly, the media are suddenly saying exactly the same thing. Watch this Orwellian exchange from CNN yesterday.
When you see people like Ted Cruz getting chased out of restaurants by a mob.
You're not going to use the mob word here.
It's totally a mob. It is without a doubt. There's no other word for it. It's a go on.
Oh my
put up
God.
a mob.
Stop.
Who the hell is that?
So a mob is not actually a mob because the word mob is not allowed on television anymore. But wait. Aren't journalists supposed to be the champions of clear language? Well, not when euphemism better serves their political goals. If banning words is what it takes to help the Democratic Party, they're happy to do it. Not surprisingly, CNN did that very same segment again later in the day, repetition being the heart of propaganda. Watch it again.
Is it mob behavior? No, it's not mob behavior.
Yes,
it's people who are upset and they're angry with the way the country is going and the policies. In the Constitution, you can protest whenever and wherever you want. It doesn't tell you that you can't do it at a restaurant. It doesn't tell you that you can't do it on a football field. It doesn't tell you that you can't do it on a cable news show. You can do it wherever you want. And to call people mobs because they are exercising their constitutional right is just beyond the pale.
Did you hear that? What happened to Ted Cruz is not mob behavior. And by the way, it's, quote, beyond the pale for you to suggest otherwise. What happened to Cruz wasn't so different from those love-ins you've seen in the documentaries about the 1960s. Doe-eyed women in Indian print dresses passing out flowers to soldiers. In case you've forgotten, we have the Cruz tape. Watch.
We believe survivors. Section 3 is anti-gay. We believe survivors. We believe survivors.
Okay, it wasn't quite as restrained or calm as we remembered. So let's pause for a second and consider how this story could be told differently. Same facts, different spin. A senator named Rafael Cruz is having dinner with his wife at a restaurant in Washington. A group of screaming, predominantly white political activists surround the couple and yell at them until they leave the building. That actually happened, as you just saw. But let's say this hypothetical Rafael Cruz was a liberal Democrat and not a Republican from Texas. You think Don Lemon and his fellow CNN anchors would describe that as a legitimate, constitutionally protected protest? Or could possibly the word mob come up, and white supremacy and Nazi? What do you think about that? This is not the first time, though, we've seen this variety of dishonesty. It was also Don Lemon, amazingly, who just last August came rushing to the defense of that emerging Democratic constituency, Antifa.
It says it right in the name, Antifa, anti-fascism, which is what they were there fighting. Listen, there's, no organization is perfect. There was some violence. No one condones the violence, but there were different reasons for Antifa and for these neo-Nazis to be there. One, racist fascists. The other group fighting racist fascists. There's a distinction there.
Yeah, Dumbo. Anti-fascist. It's in the name. There's a distinction there. Just as there was a distinction in Ferguson and Baltimore and Charlotte and every other city that's gone up in flames in the past 10 years. A riot was not a riot, it was a protest. Looting wasn't looting, it was undocumented shopping. And what you're hearing on cable news isn't news, it's lying. At least Eric Holder is brave enough to speak the truth without euphemism. Holder isn't some dopey CNN anchor taking orders from his superiors. He's the former Attorney General of the United States, the country's chief law enforcement officer. Holder doesn't need to pretend that a mob isn't a mob. He's running for president as a Democrat. His job is to assemble mobs and send them out on behalf of the Democratic Party. And that's exactly what he did today. Watch this.
Michelle says that, when they go low, we go high. No. When they go low, we kick them.
Kick them! Yay, yells the mob. Why not shoot them or burn them? Good question. Why not? The former Attorney General has given his permission to get physical. Don't be surprised when they obey. Robert Petito is an attorney and a radio show host. He joins us tonight on the set. Robert, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
So kick them. Kick them, says the former chief law enforcement officer of the United States. What am I to make of that?
Well, just to make it, he's a desperate person running for president in 2020 who doesn't have a very good chance of winning. I think that instead of us concentrating so much on these radical statements of people on the far, far fringes of the political society, let's look at the 90% of the people in the middle of American politics who aren't interested in Antifa, who aren't interested in rioting or mobbing or looting, but want better schools, who want better health care, who want better education, and who want a political system that works. This is the response to Trump, where Democrats feel they need to get more muscular. They need to fight back. They want a boxer in there to box with Trump. What we really need is somebody who, as George Bush said, is a uniter, not a divider.
Well, actually, I couldn't agree with you more. And that 90% who thinks that all this is a distraction from the core issues, which are mostly economic, is the people we're trying to appeal to at this show. So I agree with you completely. I disagree when you describe Eric Holder, the former Attorney General of the United States, long-serving, as a fringe political character. He's at the very center of our establishment. He lived in my neighborhood. He's the former Attorney General. I mean, this is not some Octavio Cortez woman from Brooklyn. This is Eric Holder.
Well, look, what we saw during the Senate hearings were senators who wanted to make a name for themselves and get attention leading into the 2020 race. We see Eric Holder making statements trying to get into the 2020 race. We see Michael Avenatti running around everywhere to get into the 2020 race. Instead of these, what I call fringe candidates, let's look at people who have actual plans, who have actual policy proposals that are going to help middle-class people. You live in You live in a neighborhood with Eric Holder. I live in Georgia, where we don't really have these far people. You grow up together, you watch SEC football, you go hunting, you go fishing, you drink beer, and you end up on different sides of the political aisle, but you have places in the middle where you agree. The problem is we take the most far left person and the most far right person and say that they represent most Americans.
I literally couldn't, and I'm surprised I'm saying this, I could not agree with you more. My concern is that we're entering a vortex where you do have people encouraging violence. Again, the former Attorney General just did on camera. And once that begins, it becomes almost impossible for people to think clearly. I mean, if people are getting radical, surrounding people and making them leave restaurants I've never seen anything like that in 49 years here.
Well, I think what you have to do is start having conversations across enemy lines, quote unquote. I've been.
Wait, hold on, can't we? Of course, I couldn't agree more with you, but shouldn't someone who has moral authority in the eyes of people who pay attention to politics, how about Barack Obama, who employed this guy for years, stand up and say, kick people? What? No. Well, stop that talk. What is this?
He even quoted Michelle Obama, who gave us the clear instructions, which is when they go low, you go high. I would also like.
Wait, so where are they? So I think it's a fair question. Where are they? Where are the Obamas today?
That is where the majority of voters are at. Most of voters don't want to be out here fighting random Nazis and Antifas.
I agree completely.
But also you have to have President Trump giving leadership on this, not saying drag that SOB off the field, knock him in the head, or whatever else he wants to say. Let's have a civil conversation on both sides.
I couldn't agree more, and I hate that kind of talk no matter who it comes from. But in this case, right now, you just had the clearest possible example of it, and you have also a clear solution. So I didn't care for President Obama's policies at all. I thought they hurt the country. But personally, he is revered by a lot of Americans to this day, and so is his wife. They could stand up and say, we like Eric Holder, but we just want to be totally clear that violence is never an acceptable option in the United States as a way to express political differences. And that might prevent what I see coming and you see coming too, which is something truly awful being spurred on by people like that.
Well, if you look at the history of 19th century Europe, leading up to World War I, what you saw this same sort of political rhetoric, ethnicism, nationalism, people retreating into their corners, demonizing the people on the other side of the argument. Instead of doing that, I think right now the former president, former first lady, don't want to be seen as if they're putting their thumb on the scale in favor of any candidate who might run. But you'll see a rejection of that from the voters when the early primary states come out, and you end up with 1% of the vote.
And I hope you're right. I think the Democrats are really hurting themselves. If they just made a middle-class economic argument, they would rule forever. Anyone who does that wins. That hasn't occurred, apparently. But why not let's just stop this before it goes where we all know it's going, which is into crazy town.
Well, like I said, what people have to do is start going into the outside of the echo chamber. Don't just campaign to people who like you. Don't just talk to groups that agree with you. Look, Tucker, let's take this show and go do it at a HBCU, or let's go do it in the middle of Chicago. And we'll talk about it.
Only show I'm aware of in all of television that invites people on to make a counter case. I don't think there is another show. I believe in that as a core belief, and I mean it. Obviously, I mean it. I'm worried that we're moving toward violence, and that's the worst thing always.
Well, I think what we have to do is start having these conversations where people can agree on things they agree on and handle those first.
I'm for that. Well, I agree with you on that. Robert Petito, thank you very much.
Thanks,
Good to see you. Dana Lash is a radio show host, and she joins us tonight. Are you as worried as I am about where this is going?
No, Tucker, good to be with you. I am. I share the exact same concerns as you do, and I actually agreed a lot with your guest as well. It does seem that common ground is really difficult to be found lately, and any attempt to find any common ground is immediately attacked by those fringes. The thing, though, that I keep hearing so often from individuals who are on the left as a way to try to justify this, they position their defense of Antifa or some of these mobs, and that's what they were, mobs chasing the cruises out of a restaurant, and mobs that are doxing Republican senators and their families. They're mobs chasing people like Senator McConnell in an airport. They keep saying, well, Trump says this or Trump says that, which I think we all agree we need to be able to have civil, nuanced conversation. Right. But to think that this started with the administration is a really silly argument, because I can remember during the Tea Party rallies when we would be anywhere in the country with people that are bringing portable coolers full of juice boxes, and they're bringing lawn chairs, and we were all completely derided. We had our characters impugned. We were called every name in the book. This didn't start with the Trump administration.
No, it didn't, and yet we're at a new place, a place that I don't think we've been in 50 years anyway, at least.
I agree.
Where we're on the cusp of something horrible. There are still widely respected people in this country. I don't see my job as ginning up partisan rage and getting people to act out in violence. That's a totally irresponsible thing to do. Where are the people on the left who are making that? I mean, there are responsible people on the left. Why are they so cowardly they can't speak up now?
Well, and true, and I think Heidi Heitkamp is one of those. She condemned Hillary Clinton's remarks when Hillary Clinton said essentially that they're not going to be civil so long as they don't have power. But there needs to be more like Heidi Heitkamp. But at the same time, though, I kind of wonder if it isn't too late. I sincerely, genuinely hope it's not. I hope we can get back to a place where we can exchange ideas. But I really feel like, you called them the other night, Tucker, you called them, these individuals out there, the Antifa and what we saw in Portland, shock troops. And I thought that was a great way to put it, because normally it's always been the party establishment, the leadership, that has sort of jerked on the leash of the shock troops. They use them to get voter turnout. It's a tactic. We see this every election.
You're right.
But don't you think it's kind of going the other way now? The shock troops are sort of jerking the leash of the Democrat establishment.
And this is what always happens. The revolution, you think you're using the energy of the crazies to achieve your goals, and you wake up one morning, the crazies are actually defining your agenda for you. They're in charge. It's always the same. Dana, thank you for that.
Good to see you, Tucker. Thank you.
I wanted to tell you about Hurricane Michael, which turned out to be a little bigger than many predicted. It is onshore, and it is ravaging at this hour northwest Florida. Will Nunley is in Panama City for us at the moment and joins us now. Will, what's it like?
And, of course, even though the hurricane has long made landfall, we still have a relentless wind here tonight, Tucker. And as we've begun to survey damage over the past couple of hours, this, by and large, is what we're seeing. Panama City Beach has escaped a lot of the major damage from the storm, but there is still significant damage to speak of. We have seen roofs off of buildings. We've seen a lot of siding and facade damage like this. Meanwhile, cell service very spotty here tonight. We understand that a lot of damage has happened to local radio and communication towers as well as cell towers. Power is out for a lot of us here on the Front Beach Road. There is a strict curfew in place tonight. We've seen Bay County authorities making patrols, and if anyone is caught out tonight past dark, right now they're going to be arrested on site. They're trying to curb looting before it becomes a problem. Meanwhile, we do have a sustained wind here tonight. The rain has backed off for the past couple of hours, but there is a tedious process of going street by street now here in Panama City Beach to make sure the debris is out of the road, that crews can access who they need to reach, and that everyone is okay. Back to you.
Thanks a lot, Will. The storm seemed to come out of nowhere. Stay with Fox for more coverage of Hurricane Michael and what it's doing to the southeastern United States. We'll check out in other areas later in the hour. Democrats have tried a new tack recently, attacking people for the color of their skin. Now they are attacking U.S. institutions as bigoted, too. Why are they doing that? Dana Prina joins us to explain after the break.
She had maybe tried to win the Electoral College and the popular vote. See, the thing is, the founders really wanted our country to be a federalist system. They wanted the states to be diverse. They wanted to, basically, they did give slightly more power to the smaller states, but they generally favor the more populous states. But Democrats see going forward, California, New York, Florida, all of these big states making decisions that they want, like, for example, Medicare for all. But when some states like Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Kansas stamp their feet and say no, then the Democrats think that that's unfair. So they just want to change the rules of the game. The idea that it's racist is preposterous. You bring up the great point about Abraham Lincoln. I also just feel that it's Democrats squawking because they're struggling to find a message. They're struggling to find unity. They just want to blame the system. And they give the appearance of, one, not understanding our history. Number one, that's a problem. But number two, not appreciating our country and how our founders set it up.
That's right. They could just run on middle-class economics. That always works.
Well, this is a big waste of time as well. In our lifetime, the Electoral College is not going to change. In your grandchildren's lifetime, they might take another run at it.
Yeah. Ugh. I pray for that. Dana, thank you. Great to see you tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Well, just a few decades ago, California was the greatest state in the Union. It wasn't even close, really. Everyone knew that. Nobody makes that argument anymore, though. What happened there, and does it have any lessons for the rest of us in other states today? That's next with Victor Davis Hanson on the set. Called Snap Crap, disgusting but true, has just launched to help residents there report local waste on the sidewalk to the government. Victor Davis Hanson is, like me, a native Californian. He's a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution. His family's been there for 6 generations in the same house. He joins us tonight. Victor Davis Hanson, is an honor to have you on the set.
Thank you.
After all these years of talking to you by remote. So let's just stand back really quickly and ask the obvious question. How did the greatest state go to what it is now?
You know, it was a perfect storm, Tucker. First of all, we had $3 trillion come in for capitalization of Facebook, Google, and Apple, and it convinced millions of people in that area where the money was concentrated, Hollywood, the big universities along that coast, that they were not subject to the ramifications of their own ideology. So they could afford to dream and have all of these restrictions, greater regulations, green utopian ideas, and it was always going to affect other people, mostly in the interior, but not always. So housing went up because of the regulations, small businesses fled, taxes. We had the highest basket of gasoline sales and income taxes in the 9 states.
But that doesn't make sense. I mean, the taxes in Saudi Arabia are very low because they have, like the Bay Area,
But there were other elements to this disaster, unfortunately. We had about 10 to 15 million people who came across the southern border without legality, without English, without a high school diploma, and not on a meritocratic basis. So all of a sudden, California became a medieval society. It's like a keep. The coastal strip is the castle keep where the elite live, and everybody else serves them, and the middle class has fled, and we have 1/3 of all welfare recipients in the United States. 20% of the state lives below the poverty line, yet we have the most billionaires. So it's a pre-modern and it's a postmodern society where you pay taxes and you get schools that are 46th in the nation and infrastructure that Forbes rated 49. Thank God for Mississippi.
So the rest of Arkansas used to say that. Now it's California. Yeah. So the rest of us and our viewers who don't live in California must be thinking, well, okay, but what does this have to do with us? Should we be worried about this in the rest of the country?
Yeah, I think so, because California gave us Deukmejian, Reagan, Pete Wilson, and it was sudden. It flipped suddenly to a one-party state, and that was this weird new combination of the Democratic Party. It's a pyramidal society where very wealthy America's wealthy people are left-wing now. They're very ultra-wealthy.
Yes.
And then they have a subsidized poor on the bottom, and that was the paradigm that over-regulated, overtaxed, and sent people out of the state.
But that's one question that I honestly don't understand. So let's say you're the 41-year-old multi-billionaire who owns Twitter.
Yeah.
And 10 minutes away, people are dying of ODs on the sidewalk. Why don't you do something? I mean, Carnegie would have, Rockefeller would have.
You feel guilty about your wealth, so in the abstract, you can afford to be left-wing and help the, quote, poor, while your kids go to Menlo Park, Sacred Heart, or Castellea.
Yeah.
And then you have a big walls.
Went to
Remember, walls don't work on the southern border, but they sure work in Atherton and Hillsborough around your estate.
Yes.
So you have ways with your power, wealth, and influence to navigate around the ramifications of your own ideology, and that's what they do.
But you'd think they would want to help the people right outside their door.
You think so. You go to Redwood City, which is the service area for Silicon Valley, and poor Mexican-American people are living 6 and 7 families to a house, right under the noses of these people. So I don't think they're very liberal at all.
No, they're not. They're not liberal at all.
No, and they've ruined the state.
It's so depressing. I'm so glad that you're here with us.
I'm glad to be here.
Our viewers love you, so thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we've got a Fox News alert for you. We're continuing to follow Hurricane Michael ravaging the Gulf Coast of Florida. Phil Keating is on the scene of the hurricane. Phil, what does it look like?
Hi, Tucker. It looks like a muddy mess right now. This is Apalachicola. We were just 30 miles east of the eye, the dirty side of the storm. So the winds, the rains, and the storm surge here this morning and afternoon, many hours of it was an onslaught, a pummeling. It was hellacious, but the rain is gone. The system has moved up into Georgia. The storm surge here was anywhere from 5 to 4 feet deep, maybe 6 feet deep on this street. It subsided since about 4 o'clock dramatically, and just a few inches, maybe a foot further down the street deep. But it's leaving, obviously, a lot of mud left behind. You can see the buildings behind me that were damaged. This dumpster was picked up by the storm surge after the hurricane went northbound, and then the wind shifted, blew it over here, floating it into that building, probably destroying that building. And so as soon as sunrise happens tomorrow, the curfew will be lifted for residents if they do want to start venturing out. But the Sheriff's Department in Franklin County really has held off so far, giving the green light for people to get out there, simply because search and rescue teams are going to deploy en masse tomorrow morning on high-profile vehicles as well as boats to try to assess the damage, see how catastrophic it is, how many roads are impassable from down power lines and trees and roadways that are just simply inaccessible at this point. But you cannot get out of this town right now. 2 ways out, both remain closed off. Everyone's got to wait and see first how many people were injured and perhaps killed. We do have one confirmed fatality right now outside of Tallahassee when a tree fell on his house. Tucker?
Phil Keating in Apalachicola, Florida for us. Thank you, Phil. Well, we got more evidence tonight that Google represents a risk to both American national security and to our very democratic institutions. We'll explain what we have found after the break. Well, we've repeatedly sounded the alarm about Google and the multifaceted threat, the imminent threat it poses to this country and our democracy. Tonight, as part of our ongoing investigation, we want to bring you this. Google recently announced it will not compete for a $10 billion Pentagon project because that project would conflict with what the company calls its, quote, corporate values. And yet, even as it abandons the U.S. military in a country that made it possible, Google is continuing to expand its work in and on behalf of the fascist government of China. Apparently that does not violate their corporate values. To do things like working on a censored search engine that China's authoritarian regime can use to monitor and suppress the dissent from its own population. It also doesn't violate their corporate values to expand artificial intelligence research in China, even though the Chinese military is working hard to overtake the United States in artificial intelligence. But there is more. Google hoards more data than any other company in the history of the world and cannot be relied on to keep that data secure, your data. It recently emerged that Google discovered a security hole in its Google Plus platform months ago, but did not bother to inform users about it. And then there is the overriding matter of censorship, political censorship. In an 85-page internal memo obtained by this show, Google executives discussed embracing what they called a, quote, European tradition of policing and censoring online speech for the sake of increasing revenues and furthering global expansion. Of course, when Google decides to censor views that it doesn't like, it will empower people like Google design leader Dave Hogue. After Brett Kavanaugh was confirmed to the Supreme Court, Hogue tweeted this, quote, "You are finished, GOP. You polished the final nail for your own coffins. F you all to hell." Well, Google gave a typically disingenuous statement to this show, saying that everyone ought to calm down and ignore the evidence that they're looking at. Quote, "Google is committed to free expression. Supporting the free flow of ideas is core to our mission. Where we have developed our own content policies, we enforce them in a politically neutral way. Giving preference to content of one particular ideology over another would fundamentally conflict with our goal of providing services that work for everyone." Not one of those words is true, and we've proved that consistently. Harmeet Dillon is an attorney. She represents James Damore in his lawsuit against Google, which fired him for expressing his opinions, and she joins us tonight. Harmeet, thank you for coming on. Tell me what your reaction is, knowing all that you do about how Google operates, when you hear a statement like that, self-righteously lecturing the rest of us about freedom of expression and openness.
Well, I'm glad that the public's attention is now being drawn to what James Damore and several other of my clients have known for some time, which is that Google talks out of both sides of its mouth. Internally, it absolutely crushes and punishes conservatives and punishes dissent, and also skews its search engine results in its products against conservatives. But then publicly, it tells lawmakers, it tells the public, it tells regulators, it tells the courts that it's not doing any of those things. And now with that document you talked about, it's been caught red-handed saying internally, yeah, of course we censor, and it's good censorship, and of course, it's beneficial socially to do that for ourselves as a business and for society as a whole. So they're going to need to now be held accountable and reconcile these irreconcilable positions that they have.
So correct me if I'm wrong, you're the attorney here, but doesn't Google have some kind of exemption granted by Congress under the Decency Act where it pledges to not act as a news organization, not edit content, but be a pipeline through which information flows? They're clearly violating that agreement, and yet Congress is doing nothing about it because why?
Yeah, bingo, Tucker, under Communications Decency Act, Section 230, all of these big social media companies, Twitter, Facebook, Google, and others, have immunity. So Fox News, for example, can't label me or somebody else dangerous and then sideline us and censor us. That would be defamatory. But Google, Twitter, Facebook, and others can, and they do every day. And so now they're acknowledging it privately. They're not acknowledging it publicly. But Google and these other companies, they spread large buckets of cash around Capitol Hill. It's effective, and everybody looks the other way. It's protection money.
But I mean, they're lying. I don't understand. I mean, it's really simple. They have this exemption. We don't have it. News organizations don't have it. They have it, and they're lying. And no one in Congress does anything. Why is that not infuriating?
It's outrageous, and we need to hold them accountable. And this is on both sides of the aisle. I mean, this problem could be a bilateral problem. The issue is that, they're relying on an outmoded concept that at the nascent early stages of the internet, that this protection was needed. That's long gone. These people don't need protection. The public needs protection from them. And so, the tables are turned. That's one thing that they're very concerned about, losing that. The other is, of course, antitrust regulation.
Well, and we're on both of those. I know you are too. Harmeet, we will see you again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Nikki Haley's departure from the Trump administration was a surprise. Who should replace her? We have details on that question.